Hello everyone, how's your days going? I'm doing so well. I'm sitting down in the Las Vegas for my career, so I'm so happy to be here, and I'm also happy, you know, with you to teach the Christian church music. This is the last lecture, so I'm so glad, you know, we we've learned together so much things, about the Christian church music. It is from the ancient society to the, um, Middle Age and the Renaissance, classical, and now we are going to talk about contemporary. So originally, I, I, um, I scheduled to teach uh, United States Christian church music, but I changed my mind because, I'm going to talk about the scriptures and the CCM. It is not only relate to the United States, it is also for the worldwide. It is, it is spread out in the world, not only in the US. I could say it is origin by US. Think so? I think so, but we we cannot just judge, preachers and the CCM are related to uh, United States only. So so I'm going to dedicate my brain and my my whole spirit to preachers and CCM. So please focus on that, music. This is all about the contemporary. So I believe you're gonna more enjoy rather than, the classical music. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. So we only have two categories today. The first is the preachers. We can say it's the black preacher, African American preacher, or preacher music like that. And then we are gonna talk about the contemporary Christian music as a CCM. As everybody know, we sing CCM or preachers every uh, every day, especially who interested in that kind of music, we can just search on YouTube easily. So I highly recommend that, after this lecture, just search on YouTube. You can find, 1 billion music on YouTube. So yes. So the firstly, I'm going to talk about the preachers. So as preachers, also known as a Negro preachers, African American preacher, Black preachers, or preachers music is a genre of Christian music that is associated with Black Americans, which merged Saharan African cultural heritage with the experience of being held in bondage in slavery. At the first, during the transatlantic slave trade and the 4 centuries afterwards through the domestic slave trade. So preachers encompass the sing songs and the work songs and the plantation songs that evolved into the blues and the gospel songs in church. In the 19th century, the word preachers referred to all these subcategories of folk songs. While they were often rooted in biblical stories, they also described the uh, extreme hardship endured by African Americans who were enslaved from the 17th century until the 1860s. the freedom altering mainly the nature of slavery for many. Many new imitative music genres emerged from this preacher's songcraft. So, so prior the end of the U.S. Civil War and freedom, as preachers were originally an oral tradition passed from one slave generation to the next. Biblical stories were memorized then translated into song. Following freedom, the lyrics of preachers were published in printed form. Ensembles such as the Fisk Jubilee Singers, established in the 1871, popularized the preachers, bringing them to a wider, even international audience. So at first, major recording studios were only recording white musicians performing preachers and their byproduct. That changed with the Mamie Smith, the commercial success in the 1920s. Starting in the 1920s, the commercial recording industry increased the audience for the preachers and their byproducts. So black composers, Harry Burley and R. Uh, Nathaniel Datt created a new repertoire for the concert stage by applying their Western classical education to the preachers. While the preachers were created by a circumscribed community of people in bondage, over time they became known as the first signature music of the United States. So I'm going to share music for you to understand what is, preacher. So I'm going to play the Deep River by Harry Burley, a song by soprano Kathleen, no, Kathleen mezzo soprano Jessie Norman. That sounds so beautiful, and you can feel the sorrow of that. So please enjoy the music. Mm. And also, I'm going to show you the Fisk Jubilee singers. I told you already they got so famous for the, spiritual music. So they still they still perform. So I want to show you this video. Still away to Jesus. Yes. So now, uh, now I'm going to talk about the history of the Black preachers because we need a basic idea, the history of the African American people, how did they come here in America, and what happened at the time. So why they sung why they sang this to Black preachers. So the first story I'm going to talk that, the transatlantic slave trade, which took place over 400 years, was the largest first migration in the recorded human history. Most were taken from the West African coast to the Americas. So from the 1501 through the 1867, around 12.5 million Africans from almost every country with an Atlantic coastline were kidnapped and forced into slavery, according to the 2015 atlas based on about 35,000 slaving voyages. Roughly 6% of all enslaved Africans transported via the slave trade arrived in the United States, both before and after the colonial era. A majority of these Africans came from the West African slave coast. The domestic slave trade that emerged after the United States Congress outlawed the international slave trade in 1808 and lasted until the U.S. Civil War destroyed the generation of African American families. Slavery in the United States differed from the institution in other regions of the Americas, such as the West Indies, Dutch Guiana, and Brazil, where the majority of enslaved Africans were sent as part of the slave trade. In the US, there was the high and sustained natural increase in the slave population for more than a century and a half, with numbers nearly tripling by the end of the domestic slave trade in the 1860s. During that period, around 1.2 million men, women, and children, the vast majority of whom were born in America. So, spouses were separated from the one another, and the parents were separated from their children. By 1850, most enslaved African Americans were third, fourth, or fifth generation of Americans. In the 1800s, the majority of enslaved people in the British West Indies and Brazil had been born in Africa, whereas in the United States, they were generations removed from Africa. So the institution of slavery ended with the conclusion of the U.S. Civil War in 1865. The first enslaved Africans had arrived on current U.S. soil in 1526, making landfall in the present-day Winyah Bay, South Carolina, in a short-lived colony called San Miguel de Gualdape. They were the first to stage a slave rebellion. In 1619, the first slave ship had carried 20 people from the West Central African Kingdom of the Congo to a life of enslavement in what is now Mexico. The Kingdom of Congo at that time stretched over an area of 60,000 miles in the landmark of the Congo River, which is the longest river in Africa, and had a population of 2.5 million, was one of the largest African kingdoms. For a brief period, King of Congo had voluntarily converted to Catholicism, and for close to 3 centuries, from 1491 to 1750, the Kingdom of the Congo had practiced Christianity and was an independent cosmopolitan kingdom. The descending of the rice plantation enslaved Gula people, whose country of origin is Sierra Leone, were unique because they had been much more isolated on the island of the coast of the South Carolina. So Gula's preachers are sung in a Creole language that was influenced by African American vernacular English, with the majority of African words coming from the Akan, uh, Yoruba, and Igbo. So I'm going to share another music that is Lord, I Love That Man by Mamie Smith. So please enjoy the music. Yeah, that music is more contemporary, the late 19th century to the early 20th century. So now I'm going to talk about the cultural origins of spiritual music. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the African Foundation. The J.H. Kwabena Nketia, described by the New York Times in the 2019 as the preeminent scholar of African music, said in the 1973 that there is an important interdependent, dynamic, and unbroken conceptual relationship between African and African American music. Enslaved African Americans in the plantation South drew on the native rhythms and their African heritage. According to a May 2012 PBS interview, his preachers were religious folk song, often rooted in the biblical stories, woven together, a song and passed along from the one slave generation to others. So according to Walter Pitt, 1996 book, preachers are a musical form that is indigenous and specific to the religious experience of African slaves and their descendants in the United States. Pitt said that they were a result of the interaction of music and religion from Africa with music and religion of European origin. In a May 2012 PBS interview, Uzi Brown Jr. said that the preachers were the survivor tools for the African slave. Brown said that while other similarly oppressed cultures were virtually wiped out, the African slaves survived because of the preachers by singing through many of their problems, by creating their own way of communicating. Enslaved people introduced a number of new instruments to America. The bones, body percussion, and an instrument uh, variously called the banya, banyu, or banya, a precursor to the banjo, but without the fret. They brought with them from Africa long-standing religious traditions that highlighted the importance of storytelling. Evidence of the vital role African music has played in the creation of African American preachers exists, among other elements, in the use of the complex rhythms and the polyrhythms from the West Africa. So their music is related to the religion in everyday life. According to the belief of slave religion, the material and the spiritual are part of the essential unit. Music, religion, and everyday life are inseparable in the scriptures, and through them, religious ideas were infused into the activities of everyday life. The scriptures provide some immunity protecting the African American religion from the being colonized, and in this way preserve the sacred as a potential space of resistance. A 2015 article in the Journal of Black Studies said that it was not surprising, therefore, that preachers were sung primarily as rowing songs, field songs, work songs, and social songs, rather than exclusively within the church. The article described how, through the use of metonymy, and the preachers acted as a form of the religious education, able to speak together of material and the spiritual freedom. For example, in the scripture, Still Away to Jesus. I played the music by the choir, so you already listen to music Still Away to Jesus. It's so important song in the church. So in William Elijah Barton's Old Plantation Hymns, the author wrote that African American hymns seldom make allusion to the Bible as a source of inspiration. They refer her to religion, to book religion. Barton, who attended the service with African Americans, says that they did not sing the ordinary hymns that strengthened assurance by a promise of God in Holy Scripture. Rather, in the African American hymns, they appear to more personal revelation from the Lord. He cites the examples of We Are Some of the Praying People and a hymn from Alabama, Wear a Starry Crown. He also notes that both these songs have a threefold repetition and a concluding line. In the latter, we find that the familiar swing and the syncopation of the African Americans. So the first great awakening or uh, evangelical revival, a series of the Christian revival in the 1730s and the 1740s, swept Great Britain and its North American colonies, result in the many enslaved people in the colonies being converting to Christianity. During that time, Northern Baptist and the Methodist preachers convert African Americans, including those who were enslaved. In some communities, African Americans were accepted into Christian communities as deacons. From 1800 to 1825, enslaved people were exposed to the religious music of camp meetings on the ever-expanding frontier. As African religious traditions declined in America in the 18th and the 19th centuries, more African Americans began to convert to Christianity. So now I'm gonna share another music of uh, preacher. So this is "Don't Let the Devil Ride" by Neil Robertson. More contemporary and more R&B and jazzy style. gonna share one more song, by Billy Preston. You can't beat God giving. I believe that this music touch your heart. Yeah, so beautiful. I love personally. I love scriptures so much. Yeah. So lastly, I'm going to talk about you know the lyrics of the scriptures music, based on the biblical themes. So by the 17th century, enslaved Africans were familiar with the Christian biblical stories, such as the story of Moses and Daniel, seeing their own stories reflecting them. An Africanized form of uh, Christian, Christian, Christianity evolved in the slave population with African American preachers providing a way to express the community's new faith as well as its sorrows and hopes. As Africans were exposed to the stories from the Bible, they began to see parallels to their own experiences. The story of the banishment of the Jews and their captivity in Babylon resonate resonate with their own captivity. The lyrics of Christian preachers reference symbolic aspects of the biblical images, such as Moses and Israel's exodus from Egypt in songs such as Michael rowed the boat ashore. There is also a duality in the lyrics of scriptures. They communicated many Christian idols while also communicating the hardship that was a result of the being an enslaved. The river Jordan in the traditional African American religious song became a symbolic borderland not only between this world and the next. It could also symbolize travel to the north and the freedom, or could signify a well-known border from the status of slavery to living free. So syncopation or ragtime was a nature part of the spiritual music. Songs were played on African-inspired instrument too. So that's it. That's for the preachers. So lastly, I'm going to share woman music. So she's Yolanda Adams, the most like a contemporary Christian singer. So this is sung in the 2004. So and everyone knows how great thou art. So that's the music. Wow, I almost cried. Yolanda Adams has the powerful voice, not only powerful, but also spiritually so emotionally so great. So please keep listening that kind of music, please. And I'm going to further my lecture with contemporary Christian music. So, so mostly you're all familiar with the CC, because we always play and listen this music in the church nowadays. Yeah, more than the choir music. So I don't think church doesn't have a drum nowadays. Mm. And they sing a worship song the before the starting worship. So usually use people, you know, in the front of the front, and for the ceremony sing they sing CCM, mostly. So the people can be inspired their emotion, things to Jesus before starting worship. So now I'm going to talk about the CCM deeply. So contemporary music, also known as the CCM, Christian pop, and occasionally inspirational music, is a genre of the modern popular music and an aspect of the Christian media which is lyrically focused on matters related to the Christian faith and stylistically rooted in the Christian music. It was formed by those affected by the 1960s, the Jesus movement revival began to express themselves in other styles of popular music beyond the church music of hymns, gospel, and the Southern gospel music that was common in the church at the time. Initially referred to as the Jesus music, today the term is typically used to refer to pop, but also includes rock, alternative rock, hip hop, metal, contemporary worship, punk, hardcore punk, Latin, EDM, R&B influenced gospel, and country style. So it has representation on the several music charts, including Billboard Christian albums, Christian songs, Hot Christian AC, Christian CHR, Soft AC, uh, inspirational and Christian digital songs, as well as the UK's official Christian gospel albums chart. Top-selling system artists will also appear on the Billboard 200. In the iTunes Store, the genre is represented as part of the Christian and gospel genre, while the Google Play music system labels it as a Christian and gospel. So, so now I'm going to talk about the history briefly. So the growing popularity of the rock and the roll music in the 1950s was initial, initially dismissed by the church because it was believed to encourage sinfulness. Yet, as evangelical churches adapted to appeal to more people, the musical style used in worship changed as well by adopting the sounds of this popular style. The genre became known as contemporary Christian music as a result of the Jesus movement revival in the later 1960s and early 1970s, and was originally called Jesus music. About that time, many young people from the 60s counterculture professed to believe in Jesus. Convinced of the bareness of the lifestyle based on drugs, free sex, and radical politics, some of the Jesus hippies became known as Jesus people. However, there were people who felt that Jesus was another tree. It was during the 1970s, the Jesus movement, that Christian music started to become an industry within itself. Jesus music started by playing instruments and singing songs about the love and peace, which then translate into love of God. Uh, the 1970s will see a marked acceptance of rock influenced music in all levels of church music. The rock style will become more familiar to people. Its rhythmic accesses will become refined, and its earlier secular associations will be less remembered. So evangelical and the Protestant Christianity formed a born-again style of Christian music. Those involved were affected by the late 1960s to early 1970s Jesus movement, and informally self-referred to as the Jesus freaks, as the counterculture movement of hippies, flower children, and the flower power swept the nation. The Calvary Chapel was one such movement which launched Maranatha music in 1971. They soon began to express themselves in alternative styles of popular music and worship music. Larry Norman is often remembered as the father of Christian rock because of his early contributions to the developing new genre that mixed rock rhythms with the Christian messages. Though his style was not initially well received by many in the Christian community of the time, he continued throughout his career to create controversial hard rock songs such as Why Should the Devil Have All the Good Music? He is remembered as the artist who first combined rock and roll with the Christian lyrics in the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. Though there were Christian albums in the 1960s that contained contemporary sounding songs, there were two albums recorded in the 1969 that are considered to be the first complete albums of Jesus rock. Upon this rock by Larry Norman, initially released on Capitol Records. Unlike traditional old Southern gospel music, this new Jesus music was birthed out of rock and folk music. So, pioneer of this movement also include Andre Crouch and the disciple, the second chapter of the Act, Barry Mecker, Abbey, Paul Clark, the Imperials, and Keith Green, among others. The small Jesus music culture had expanded into a multi-million-dollar industry by the 1990s and 1980s. Many CCM artists such as Benny Hester, Amy Grant, DC Talk, Michael W. Smith, Striper, and the Jars of Clay found crossover success with top 40 mainstream radio play. So I'm going to share one video by Larry Norman to speak about the, rock music with Jesus and Christianity, and then he play his music, Why Should the Devil Have All the Good Music? So can you feel that his affection at the time? So many people were affected by his, performance and his songs. Not only not only his songs, but also that kind of the singers were emerged at the time, 1970s, like that. So after that, uh we could consider the music not only the just classical or spiritual music, but also pop music also can be Christian music. So now I'm going to further to talk about the contemporary Christian music. So the genre and became common in the 1970s and the 1980s. Beginning in the July 1978, CCM magazine began covering contemporary Christian music, artists, and a wider range of spiritual themes until it launched online publication in the 2009. So it has certain themes and messages behind the songs and their lyrics, including praise and worship, faith, encouragement, and prayer. These songs also focus on themes of devotion, inspiration, redemption, reconciliation, and renewal. Many people listen to contemporary Christian music for comfort through tough times. The lyrics and the messages conveyed in the CCM songs have had a varied, the positive Christian messages over the decades. For example, some of the songs have been aimed to uh, event, uh, evangelize, and some of the lyrics are meant to praise and worship Jesus. One of the earliest goals of CCM was to spread the news of the Jesus to non-Christians. In addition, contemporary Christian music also strengthened the faith of Christians. So that's what I all prepared. So, but uh, you can feel that the system music is still alive and still so many so many artists compose and sing and system around the world. So especially I'm going to show one video by Hillsong Church. So Hillsong Church are more, specialized by the worship songs. So, so many Christian people around the world enjoy that music, you know, on even in the, Europe, Asia, and America too. So the song's name is "Who You Say I Am" by Hillsong Worship. Yeah, finally we are all done of with Christian church music. I was so happy to be with you, and I am happy about sharing so many different kind of music with you. So as you see, you've learned not only one music style, but also by nation to nation, tribe to tribe, you know, and the race by race, the period by period, we have so many different kind of music for the praising God. So I highly recommend you just to keep keep listening that kind of music, not only for the one music, but also but also you know so many different kind of music, like Jewish music to the contemporary music, like that. So I'm so glad to show you and show you that all music. My major is classical music, especially for opera and oratory. But I've learned also so much about the variety of music, that Christian music. So so this is time to say goodbye. So I hope to see you all again next or another semester. So have a good week and good 2022, and you know and please listen more music, Christian music, I mean. Okay. Bye.